Picture the most stressful job interview you have ever had. Now imagine you got the name wrong. You called the interviewer Dave when his name was clearly printed Kevin on the badge in front of you.
It's Pam.
I'm sorry. Well, Pan.
No, my name is Pam.
Are you saying Pan or Pam?
I'm saying Pam.
That is embarrassing. Now imagine that instead of a job interview, you were, I don't know, holding a saw, and instead of a name, it was a leg. That's not embarrassing. That is a lawsuit, a Senate investigation, and a very different kind of career ending. Medical errors kill more than 250,000 Americans every year, which makes them the third leading cause of death in the United States, behind heart disease and cancer, but ahead of respiratory disease, ahead of accidents, ahead of basically everything you actually worry about. And the most jaw-dropping ones aren't caused by incompetent doctors. Most of them are caused by something far worse. Completely competent people following a broken system. So here are 5 of the most shocking surgical mistakes ever recorded. All of them real, all of them documented, and most of them led to changes to how surgery is done everywhere in the world. And one of them happened at the same hospital 3 times in a single year, which suggests that maybe some people didn't read the memo. Our first one starts in Tampa, Florida, February 20th, 1995. A 51-year-old diabetic patient named Willie King is wheeled into the operating room at University Community Hospital. He needs a foot amputated. The disease has destroyed the circulation in his right foot, and there is no saving it. Pretty clear situation. Documented, understood by everyone. The problem started before Dr. Rolando Sanchez ever walked into that room. Somewhere in the scheduling process, someone had written down the wrong foot. Not just in one place, in the backboard in the operating room, in the hospital computer system, in the operating room schedule, 3 separate documents, all listing the wrong limb. By the time Dr. Sanchez arrived, the nurse had already sterilized and prepped the wrong foot. The whole room was set up for the wrong leg. Both of King's feet were badly diseased from diabetes, so there was no obvious visual clue that something was off. So the surgery began, and about halfway through, a nurse reviewed the patient's consent form, one of the only documents in the room that had the correct information. She started shaking. Then she started crying. Dr. Sanchez later testified he was still cutting when the nurse told him what had happened. It was too late. When Willie King woke up in the recovery room, a surgeon gently touched his leg and asked how he felt. King's response became one of the most quoted lines in medical malpractice history. That's when I discovered it. I said, "Doctor, that's the wrong leg." The surgeon was speechless. Dr. Sanchez had his license suspended for 6 months. He was fined $10,000. $10,000 for a man's leg. King eventually received $1.15 million from the hospital and the surgeon combined, but he still had to go to a different hospital to have the correct foot removed. He lost both of them anyway, just on a slightly different schedule than planned. The Willie King case is why surgeons in Florida are now legally required to conduct a timeout before every surgery to stop, confirm the patient's name, the procedure, and the exact site before the first cut. That rule came into effect in 2004, 9 years after the incident that nobody really wants to sit with for too long. 9 years. Wait, that rule came into effect in 2004, 9 years after the incident, which raises a question that nobody really wants to sit with for too long. The second story happened on the exact opposite side of the body. We're going from the foot all the way up to the brain. Rhode Island Hospital, 2007. A neurosurgeon is preparing to operate on a patient whose CT scan clearly shows bleeding on the left side of the head. So he drills into the right side. He catches his mistake early though, closes the initial hole, switches to the correct side. The patient survives with the injury in fair condition. Terrible, inexcusable, and it would be a shocking one-time incident, except it was actually the second time that year. Earlier in 2007, a different surgeon at the same hospital operated on the wrong side of a different patient's head. Unfortunately, that patient died 3 weeks later. And then it happened a third time, in the same hospital, same category of error. 3 patients, 3 wrong-side brain surgeries in 12 months. The Rhode Island Department of Health fined the hospital $50,000 after the 3rd incident. The hospital director made a public statement saying that they were all extremely concerned about this continuing pattern. Yeah, I would bloody hell hope so, mate. What's wrong with you? So anyway, the hospital was ordered to create a mandatory neurosurgery checklist, and it completely revamped how surgical plans were verified, which is exactly what, they probably should have done before any of this happened. And this brings us to the 3rd case. This one involves a celebrity, actually, which is somehow the only reason most people have ever heard of it. Wayne's World, The Garth, Dana Carvey. At the time, he was 42 years old, and he goes in for a heart bypass surgery in 1998. His left coronary artery is severely blocked. The surgeon bypasses the wrong artery, the left circumflex artery, which was completely healthy. The blocked one goes untouched. Carvey has a heart attack shortly after the surgery. When the error was discovered, he had to undergo emergency surgery to correct it. Bypass the actually blocked artery and repair the damage to the artery that should have been bloody well left alone. He spent nearly 2 years recovering from what was supposed to be a routine procedure. The surgeon called it an honest mistake. Carvey sued for $7.5 million. In court, he said, "This lawsuit from the beginning was about accountability and doing everything I could to make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else." He settled. The amount was never disclosed. The surgeon continued practicing. Okay, so now numbers 4 and 5 are a little bit different, so bear with me on these. And they don't involve the wrong site, they involve something left behind, which is perhaps the strangest category of surgical error because shouldn't be possible. You see, before every surgery, the team counts every single item going into the patient. Every sponge, every clamp, every instrument, hopefully fingers maybe as well. They count again at the end. And the goal is that if the numbers match, well, nothing was forgotten. Except the numbers are counted by humans under pressure, sometimes for hours at a stretch. Sometimes in emergency situations where the counting gets rushed and interrupted. And, sometimes the count is wrong. I too struggle to count past 10 unless I take my shoes and socks off. In one documented case that led to a lawsuit in New York, a 72-year-old woman had bypass surgery at NYU Medical Center. A surgical sponge, a foot-long gauze pad used to absorb blood during the procedure, was just left inside her abdomen. So when doctors reopened her wound to remove it, the sponge had been rotting inside her body long enough to create perforations in her intestines. The patient, Nelson Bailey, described what happened next. The sponge had eaten through his bowel wall from the inside. The hospital settled rather quickly. No admission of liability. The patient's internal organs had a different view. And that case isn't unique. In 2023, 110 Sentinel event reports were filed in the US alone about objects left inside patients after surgery. Sponges made up 35% of them. The rest included guide wires, catheter fragments, and in a category listed as other, dental retractors, cords, and surgical scissors. Surgical scissors inside a patient after they went home. That's going to be a tough conversation with the TSA the next day. The final case is the one that changed everything. Not about a wrong site, not about a forgotten sponge, about blood. Jessica Santolin was 17 years old, born in Mexico, smuggled into the United States with her family so that she could receive treatment for a congenital heart condition that was slowly killing her. A local businessman named Mac Mahoney had spent years fundraising to get her on the transplant list at Duke University Hospital, one of the best cardiac centers in the world. In February 2003, after 2 years of waiting, a heart and a set of lungs became available. The transplant surgeon, Dr. James Jaggers, sent a member of his team to Boston to collect the organs. The donor had type A blood and Jessica had type O. Now, these two blood types are incompatible for organ transplantation in a way that is about as basic as medical knowledge gets. It's taught in the first year of medical school. It's on every single form. It is genuinely one of the most foundational facts in all of medicine. So what happened was this: when the team went to procure the organs, the donor's blood type was mentioned at least 3 times. Nobody had told the procuring surgeon what Jessica's blood type was. He assumed that if the hospital had called and offered him these organs, someone somewhere must have already checked. Well, he was wrong, catastrophically wrong. And it is the assumption here that's the error, not ignorance, not incompetence, a single catastrophic assumption that nobody thought to verify. The surgery was nearly complete when the lab called the operating room. The organs were the wrong blood type. Jessica's immune system, detecting foreign proteins that it had never been designed to accept, began attacking the transplanted heart and lungs immediately. She suffered a heart attack on February 10th, a seizure on February 16th, kidney failure on February 18th. By the time a second set of compatible organs was found and transplanted on February 20th, the damage was irreversible. Sadly, Jessica Santolin was declared brain dead on February 22nd, 2003, and she was 17 years old. Duke Hospital covered up the mistake for 11 days before going public. Her advocate, Mac Mahoney, held a press conference and said, "They let my baby lay on that bed for another 11 days before they decided to fess up to what they had done. And in the meantime, all her organs are ruined." The surgeon, Dr. Jaggers, took full public responsibility. He called it the worst moment of his life. He later said he tells the story to every new surgeon he trains. Duke now requires every single person involved in an organ transplant to independently verify blood type compatibility before surgery begins. That rule didn't exist before Jessica. What connects all 5 of these cases isn't carelessness, exactly. Most of these surgeons were respected professionals with years of experience. What connects them is the same thing: a system that allowed a single point of failure to travel all the way to the operating table without anyone catching it. A wrong entry on a blackboard, a missing blood type form, an assumption nobody thought to question. Every major safety protocol in modern surgery, the timeout, the checklist, the mandatory blood type verification, exists because someone died for the lack of it the first time. The consent form was in the room the whole time. It had the right foot on it, and nobody checked.